the Start Your Own Business podcast. Hear inspiring startup stories and get reliable expert advice on how to start your business and get off to the best possible start. Brought to you by Startup Donut, helping small businesses succeed.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. You're listening to the Start Your Own Business podcast. My name's Fiona and I'm your host. In this episode, I'll be talking to Rob Law, product pioneer, author, speaker and founder of Trunki, the much-loved ride-on suitcase for children. Imagine coming up with a pioneering new product design that you want to turn into a business. Imagine taking your idea onto Dragon's Den and having it ripped to shreds in front of millions of viewers. Imagine carrying on regardless and starting a business that goes on to sell millions of units to customers in more than 100 countries and creating jobs for 80 employees. Well, this is Rob's story, and he's going to be telling us today how he scaled the business and how he went on to sell it 17 years later for a reported £12 million. This series of the Start Your Own Business podcast is brought to you by Startup Donut in association with investment platform Lightyear. Before we meet Rob, let's find out more about Lightyear. Life as a business owner can be unpredictable. You need a cash flow cushion for any bumps in the road. But this doesn't mean you need to leave your cash languishing in low-interest accounts. Instead, you can earn a daily variable rate of 4.6% AER with Lightyear's business accounts. Lightyear make this possible by giving small businesses like yours a solution traditionally reserved for the big corporates. Money market funds, managed by the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock. These are low-risk investments, usually only accessible with a minimum deposit of £5 million. With Lightyear, you can access them with no minimum deposit criteria. There are no fees to open, bank transfer into, withdraw from, or maintain your business account, and your money is always easily accessible. You work hard for your income as a business owner. Lightyear lets your income work hard for you. So rather than spending weeks trying to open an account with low rates and high fees, open a Lightyear business account in one day and start putting your money to work. Whether you choose to manage your company's cash on Lightyear's slick app or the web platform, the interest you earn could mean you can hire a new employee or take that holiday you know you deserve. Visit lightyear.com/donut. That's donut, DONUT, to find out more and set up your account in just a few taps. And remember, when you invest, your capital is at risk. It's now time to meet our guest today, product pioneer, author and speaker and founder of Trunki, Rob Law. Hi there, Rob. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, great. Thanks for inviting me.
You've obviously got different businesses under your belt now, but we're here to talk initially about Trunki, the ride-on suitcases. And I wanted to ask you where the idea came from, really, because it's, something completely new to market.
Yeah, the eureka moment came about many moons ago, back in 1997. And I was studying product design at the University of Northumbria. And as a second year design class, we were asked to enter a national luggage design competition. Happened to be sponsored by a plastic manufacturer. So I was thinking about plastic luggage, went down to a local department store to try and look for some inspiration in the luggage department, and noted that hard moulded suitcases were quite fashionable all those years ago. But they're all black and boring, and kind of drifted off and found myself in the kids' toy section. And I guess I'm a big kid at heart, and I was looking at the ride-on toys selection, reminiscing about how my younger brother used to love endlessly driving his tractor around the garden, and kind of noted that the manufacturing technique to make the ride-on toys back then was a process called rotational moulding, and it wastes a lot of that internal space, and you've got a little seat that you can lift up with enough storage space for an apple or so. And just kind of reflected that maybe the technology that the adult suitcases had adopted, the injection moulding, maybe you could merge the two and create a ride-on toy that maximised that internal space, that could have a primary function for travelling. I didn't have kids way back then, but did travel quite a bit and had seen bored toddlers at airports, and thought there might be something in this.
So it started out as a college project. What kind of made you think that, however many years down the line it was, that actually there was a business in that idea?
Well, back then all I aspired to be was a product designer. I had no interest in running my own business. But when I won, I went on to win the competition, and the judges took me aside and said, you know what, Rob, you've got quite a commercial idea here. You should maybe look at licensing it. I thought that sounded like a great idea. I'd be able to retire young and let someone else do all the hard work building and launching this product. So I went down to see a company called Carlton, who are a big British manufacturer of luggage. Back then they were actually making these suitcases down in Croydon, and I kind of fine-tuned my prototype and presentation boards. I'm really excited to pitch the idea. How I told them how we're going to revolutionise family travel together, and this was a fantastic opportunity for them and for travelling families. They were very quiet in their response and scratched their chins for quite a while and shook their heads a bit and said, you do realise we make luggage? And I said, of course, that's why we're here. And they said, but you've invented a toy. Maybe you should go and see a toy manufacturer instead. So kind of that was my first rejection in business. But always the optimist. I was like, well, one door closes, another maybe opens. Maybe it is a toy and I should track down some toy companies. So back then it was the good old yellow pages, flicking through, trying to find other companies I could pitch Trunki to, and went along to see a couple of toy companies. And then with all their wisdom and after reviewing the project, you'll never guess what they said.
Back to square one, back to the travel.
They were very firmly of the opinion that it was a piece of luggage and not a toy. So I kind of played manufacturer ping pong for a number of years. I focused on my studies, graduated with a first class honours in product design. I then worked in Taiwan, New York, Australia, travelling the world as a design consultant, and always kind of fine-tuning the idea of this ride-on suitcase in the background. And in 2003 I came back to the UK and went to the London Toy Fair and finally found a startup toy company who really liked the idea. So we signed a global licensing deal, and I was looking forward to booking my ticket to a beach somewhere to sip those cocktails.
So you've had rejection from the two sort of the toy side and the luggage side. Did it ever make you doubt that there was a business idea or a viable product in it?
Well, it wasn't a core focus for me, but it was a hobby project that I kept trying to move forward, and I kind of had a gut feel that it definitely made a lot of sense, and the people I showed the product to really liked the product, not just friends and family, but going to local primary schools and getting kids to sit on the product and try it out and the likes. So this global licensing deal kicked off, and it was all very exciting to start with. They had a customer in the Middle East and they ran a national TV ad for the product. It was a co-brand with the equivalent of Barbie over there called Fula, the Fula doll. So it's called the Fula Trunki travel case. And yeah, I thought this is brilliant. And fast forward 3 years, I was working as a design consultant in Bristol, and the royalty checks never really came in, and Trunki was never sold anywhere other than the Middle East. They pitched Trunki globally and no one wanted to buy it. So it was too expensive, I guess, using this injection molding technique than other ride-on toys. And I was very disappointed that it never really got anywhere. I kept trying to suggest to this toy company maybe they could do some co-branding with like Virgin or Thomas Cook, but they were very firmly in the toy market and couldn't stretch outside it. And in October 2005, I took a phone call from the managing director saying that they hadn't been very successful with their business and they'd tried other things to sell and it hadn't really worked, so they were going to go into voluntary liquidation and they were going to close up their doors and they couldn't represent Trunki anymore. So that was initially slightly disappointing, but having been very disappointed by their lack of success and having worked as a design consultant, my biggest client was Unilever. I was designing lots of things that people really didn't need, with batteries in, from electronic deodorant cans to devices to put more bleach down the toilet, and was kind of struggling to get out of bed in the morning, because all I'd aspired to be was a product designer and I was creating junk that people didn't need. So within a couple of, it must have been seconds from this phone call, it was like, maybe there's an opportunity here for me to try and launch Trunki, and maybe it isn't a toy and it isn't luggage. I think it should be pitched as a lifestyle brand to parents, and we'll see how it goes.
And that's where it began.
Yeah, so 5th of May 2006 is hailed as Trunki's birthday, when the first container arrived at Avonmouth docks. I was then able to quit my job because I had some stock to sell, and I started learning an awful lot about business.
So how did you go about making your first sales then? You've had this trunk arrive with all of these cases and you've got to sell them. How did you go about shifting the first sales?
Well, not surprisingly, the national retailers were passing me around all the different departments, and no one would take the risk with this new concept of a ride-on suitcase. So I was literally hand delivering a couple of pieces of stock to local retailers in the Bristol area. Had 1 or 2 catalogue retailers that were on board, but primarily it was my own website. So back in 2006, there was no such thing as Shopify, so you had to custom code an e-commerce platform to be able to sell online. So fortunately, I knew someone that I'd met in Australia who was a programmer, and he created a custom website for me. We had an agreement on he would earn some commission on the sales, and I was able to start trading on the website.
So that was May of 2006.
Yeah.
A few months later, you appeared on Dragon's Den. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was a big fan of Dragon's Den. 2 seasons had aired previously, and I needed money, I needed mentoring, and I needed some TV exposure, and I certainly got one of those. So season 3, I got onto Dragon's Den pitching Trunki. I was after £100,000 for 10% of the business, and the pitch went perfectly. I towed Richard Farley around the studio, and it was looking really promising until Trixie, the pink Trunki, ended up at Theo Pathesis' feet, and as we now know, he likes to strength test products, and he kind of noticed that if you pulled the toe strap really hard, the plastic clip flexed, so he pulled it as hard as he could, it popped off, and all the dragons kind of started lambasting me for how dare I come on this program with a product that's not finished, or a product with problems. And it was a really weird experience, because to me as a product designer, it might have a problem that can easily be solved. I just couldn't understand the feedback I was getting compared with what the actual issue was. And I had just pulled Richard Farley around the studio, he's a short guy, but he's bigger than a toddler. Yeah. So I really struggled to handle that situation, and just kind of it all just unraveled in front of me. And the dragons were saying things like they could do a better job than me and have a better product in production within a month, that my business was worthless, and they didn't see the business opportunity.
Was there anything positive that came out of that experience? I mean, on the face of it, you go, oh, that must be your worst nightmare on national TV, these business experts pulling your idea to pieces. But did anything positive come from that journey? Well,
as it was TV, these things take a while to air. So 2 weeks after the first stock arrived, I went on the show. And then in September, several months later, it aired. Now, the BBC told me they'd give us plenty of time before it aired to prepare. And season 3 started, and there was no communication from the BBC. We're halfway through the season, no communication from the BBC, so I started thinking I got away with it. But as a bit of precaution, I went down to the local newsagents, picked up the Radio Times, always checked to just make sure that there was no hint of me going on. And I think it was the penultimate episode. I went down, opened Radio Times, Tuesday, 9 o'clock, BBC 2, Dragon's Den, and the headline was "Wheelie Rubbish." So the colour drains from my face. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't got away with this. This might be the end of the business. So on the walk home, I was thinking, well, I'm probably going to get a lot of web traffic, so maybe I should just post up a survey there and ask people's feedback on the product. Just check my marketing message was online, and people really understood what I was trying to achieve with the product. I wasn't expecting to really sell any, and then had a few friends over that night. It aired, and we watched it on the telly, but also projected up the live web stats. And over 3,000 people that night filled in the survey. And as most surveys, the last question was just blank. Please leave any other comments here. And I think every single person filled in that last box with phenomenal words of support, and they got the product. We ended up selling out that night. And you asked whether anything good came out of it. I had been on this long journey of, I think, 9 years trying to get this product to market, and manufacturers didn't get it, retailers didn't get it, investors didn't get it. But the most important person, my target market, my customer, got the product. And after getting that national TV exposure, we couldn't keep up with demand for the next couple of years.
Wow. Well, it just shows, doesn't it? The dragons don't always know best.
So yeah, I think the lesson there was kind of embrace challenges and try and figure out where there might be a silver lining. Just keep pushing forward and something will come back.
So when you first started Trunki, I mean, I don't know whether you had kind of experience, doesn't sound like it in terms of running your own business, but what were the sort of main challenges you faced in those early days?
It was having enough time to get stuff done. So first hire was like an operations person that got involved in a whole bunch of stuff. That was 6 months in after Dragon's Den had aired. Actually, no one applied for the job. There was just this one person, so I hired them, and they were a good fit to start with, and then we kind of outgrew each other. And as a product designer, I was very keen to launch more products around the children's travel space. I was doing all the artwork, all the graphics, everything creative to do with the brand. And in hindsight, if I'd spent a bit more time just focusing on the core product, I think we probably could have grown a bit quicker. I mean, we did have phenomenal growth anyway, but there was a distraction. That was my gut feel, was to go down and create other products rather than really pushing the core one as hard as we could. But then when you've got a portfolio of products, the bigger retailers, the bigger distributors take you a lot more seriously, and then you can sort of jump in bed with those guys. So funding was not such an issue initially. So back then there was the small firm loan guarantee, so I was able to secure, I think it was about £80,000 to really get going with the business, mainly invested in stock, and then we got some trade finance to allow us to fund that stock cycle through to getting paid. And I had an idea to create a car seat that would double as a backpack, and that came through some focus groups, talking to parents, finding out what the next greatest travel wear was. And there was an awful lot of swear words used when they were explaining how annoying it is to travel with car seats or to hire them, which are normally covered in another child's sick. Yeah. So similar insight that the car seats were made using this rotational moulding with a large internal volume that you couldn't access. So we created this product, but to bring that to market, we needed some money, and I got an angel investor involved for, I think it was £200,000 for 10%. That was 3 years into trading, 2009.
So how did you go about finding your manufacturers then?
Well, initially the factory was the same factory that had been making the product for the previous licensing company.
Oh, okay.
And then one of the founders of that toy company were running a sourcing agency for people who want to make stuff in China. So that was quite a straightforward process to work with the factories and having those guys kind of look after the relationship with the factory.
So how quickly did the business grow then? Because you'd achieved something like 20,000 units, I think, by the time you had gone on to Dragon's Den. It sounds like things grew really quite quickly. Yeah,
I think it was the international side that really took off. So that actually started with a design blog. So when I was still working as a design consultant and trying to pull together the business and that first order, I posted a press release out to a couple of my favourite design blogs, and to my absolute delight, my favourite one actually published it. So I was really chuffed, and my peers in the office were happy for me, and I went home pretty chuffed until I opened up my laptop and I had a full inbox and crazy web stats, and we had loads of interest from Japan and Australia and America. And the first email I actually opened was the Museum of Modern Art's retail buyer for their New York store, and they became my first customer. They ordered 650 from China.
That's quite a claim.
So then it was trying to figure out how to manage all these different international inquiries and how you choose which partner to go with. And the government actually had a good Department of Trade Investment back then, they were called, and they had a passport for export program to help teach you about all the things you need to understand about exporting. So we started growing internationally, and it was a great ride for those first couple of years.
Yeah, roller coaster. So what about UK retailers? How did you go about getting into the main retailers in this country?
After Dragon's Den aired, I finally got my foot in the door with John Lewis,
Right.
and we agreed a kind of a store rollout trial. But somewhere along the line, there was an error in their system, and we had national rollout, which is one of the reasons we just couldn't keep up with demand for the next couple of years, because they kept selling out.
So they came to you rather than you having to bang the doors,
Well,
which is the
I've
usual
been banging
case.
on the doors, and eventually they answered.
Yeah. So how did it feel when you saw your first Trunki in an airport or a coach station?
Yeah, I've seen so many of them, it's hard to remember the first time. But the most rewarding experience, I think, was travelling with my kids when they were a bit younger, and them just wanting to run up to any stranger that was using a Trunki and say, "My dad makes those."
I love that.
So that was really sweet.
I wanted to ask you about intellectual property. You know, when companies come up with kind of innovative designs and innovative products, it's something that you always kind of advise people, make sure you've got a tight rein on your intellectual property. But you had imitators cashing in on your designs quite early on in your journey, didn't you?
Early-ish, yeah. So I think we were like 3 years in before we started seeing some copies. Now you can't patent the idea of a ride-on suitcase. It has to have a technical advantage. So actually the plastic clasps on our latest version we kind of patented because they're very clever, but that doesn't stop anyone making a ride-on suitcase. So what I had was a European design registration that protected the shape. And because it was such a unique product, we had a wider scope of protection because no one else had launched a ride-on suitcase before. And that stood us in pretty good stead. But initially the copies from China and the Far East were exact copies, and then the European registration prevented those from being imported into Europe. It became a bit like whack-a-mole, constantly logging on to websites like Alibaba and getting them to take down. But I had a registration certificate, so that helped an awful lot. And then the factory started changing the shape a little bit of the Trunki to try and make it look outside of our shape.
Yeah.
But they literally were just growing bulges on it just to make it not look exactly the same. But our scope protection still protected an awful lot of that shape. So we were able to keep a lot more of those out of the market. And then we had a UK company that was manufacturing in China, and they copy pretty much everyone. And when I saw this product, we managed to get it removed it was at the autumn fair, I think. But my lawyers were like, "Oh yeah, we know these guys. They copy anyone who's successful, so they're not just going to roll over. They're going to want to take it all the way." But I was told that the even though it didn't look identical, it copied all the elements. They tried to cover up the wheels with covers, but they still gave the same silhouette as a wheel. So we took it to the High Court. I got a European injunction. I stood up in the witness box. Their lawyer somehow didn't think I'd actually invented the product, and I had all my old sketches, so completely wiped the floor with them. And we ended up winning, which was great. We had a European injunction banning the sale of their product until we had our big day in London. And then a few weeks later, we heard that the other side had decided to appeal that decision based on a technicality. So we went back to court and found that this time they were just arguing about IP law and how to interpret the design, because I registered the design as what you would call a grayscale CAD drawing, rather than you can register a photo or you can register line drawings. In 2003, when I registered it, there was no guidance on what was best. It was just you could use this way, or this way. And CAD was quite a new discipline, so there weren't many people registering CAD drawings because it was a new technology. And they decided that as it was grayscale and a CAD drawing, that I didn't intend to have any surface decoration on the product. So I didn't intend to have tiger stripes or bee spot, ladybird spots or anything like that. And the grey colour should mean the absence of surface decoration. And this argument went on in court, and shortly after my first daughter was born, I found out that we had lost, and the High Court had overturned the ruling, and we were then being sued for their loss of sales and all their legal costs, which felt quite unfair.
Yeah.
But this is, if you lose in court, this is standard procedure. So pretty gutted, but it just felt really unfair. So one thing I had noticed throughout this time was initially we started getting a couple of people on Facebook saying, "Oh, my Trunki's broken. It wasn't a Trunki, it was this product." And I thought I needed to let people know that there was a product that looked very similar to ours on the market. So we started talking to the press, and the press were quite interested in this because I don't think any brand had really talked to them about being copied before. This is back in 2013. And we started getting quite a few column inches, and this case was followed in quite a few of the national media outlets. And it felt like we had a chance to go into the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, had only ever heard one design case previously, so we needed to really build quite a lot of momentum behind our application. So we ran a national campaign around protecting your design and how the design industry, or the creative industry, is such a large part of the economy. And we had Sir Terence Conran, Kevin MacLeod and other celebrity designers sort of rallying behind us. So we made a bit of a splash in the papers and put in our application for the Supreme Court, and we got our day at the Supreme Court. It was a very odd and surreal day where the highest judges in the land were covered by all these brightly coloured suitcases in the courtroom. And they just carried on arguing and trying to figure out how to interpret design law. So I was completely powerless to do anything. And they decided that they would keep the decision of the overthrown case. So we ended up walking away empty-handed. We'd lost, and we'd taken it to the end of the road as far as I possibly could. And if we'd gone to Europe is a lot more protectionist of its creative industries, but the UK seems to want to have a lot more open competition, and this just predated Brexit. So unknown to us, there was a very anti-European thinking with the legal professions and the highest judges in the land. So, but we lost, and that was as far as I could take it. So it was really kind of choosing your battles. That's now over. We've got to carry on with the business. But the day the judgment was handed down, we were in every single national newspaper with full colour pictures of Trunkies, and we spun the headline to not be, we're just about to go out of business because it cost over £1 million, this legal case, but that the now new interpretation of design law was going to be very damaging to all creative industries. But a year later, we had the best sales ever in the UK. The product that we had taken all the way to court was withdrawn from the market because it was such poor quality. They kept getting so many returns. And I think through all that extra PR coverage, we raised the bar even further with our awareness.
So it's victory from the jaws of defeat in a strange way. Yeah,
so it's just trying to... I couldn't influence the outcome of the court, but I could try and influence my story, tell my narrative, and really lean, in this case, into the press a bit. And they hadn't heard much about copying before, so we just gave them everything we could.
So have you got any advice for listeners in terms of intellectual property protection on the back of your experiences?
Well, if we roll the clocks back, and for argument's sake, let's say I could have got a patent on the Trunki, which you can't, but if you could, then all available cash would have been tied up in registering that patent because they're quite expensive. They only cost £1,000 to £2,000 to register, but that's per country. And a patent is essentially a blueprint for your idea, but if you don't patent it in every country, then any country you haven't registered that patent in, it can then be copied and sold. And you're looking at probably about £100,000 minimum to be able to register and grant a patent in the UK, Europe and the US and China. So I didn't have that kind of money. I invested my money in marketing, and actually the value of the business was the brand, not built on the idea of a ride-on suitcase, but we probably had 65 copies up until I exited and stopped counting, and none of those copies really got any traction because they were just a ride-on suitcase. They weren't a brand, and parents in our market wanted to buy into the brand.
Yeah. You've mentioned already that some of the other products that you've invented, the backpack and the car seat. How important was that to the business and what you wanted to be doing?
Well, I wanted to change. I wanted to create a business that had, or a brand that had, travel solutions for families, so that you would come to Trunki if you were travelling, or then more for everyday adventures. And we would kind of help you get your toddlers out and about exploring the world. That became our kind of mission and vision.
Yeah.
So that was really important. And also in this day and age now with D2C businesses, you need a customer lifetime value. Otherwise, there's no point investing in any of the ads. So you do need a portfolio of products that you can keep selling and upselling to your customers.
The Trunki has won hundreds of design awards, and it's sold in loads of countries around the world. How proud does that make you?
Well, I think now I've exited, I know Trunki is going to carry on. If I were to get run over by a bus, Trunki would carry on. So I've created this entity, this brand that helps parents and carers take their kids off exploring the world. So yeah, very, very proud of that achievement.
I wanted to ask you as well about the design and the coverage that it's got. What kept you going when you were having those kind of difficult stages, when you were having the court case, when you were turned down for funding? What kept you going?
Well, there were a few more hurdles that I can tell you about. So in between the first container arriving and Dragon's Den airing, there was a liquid bomb threat, and a van was driven into Glasgow Airport, and the Secret Services foiled this plan to blow up planes with liquid bombs, and as a result they decided to ban hand luggage. So the product I just launched was banned from its primary use when I just launched it. So I had to kind of learn then very quickly how to pivot my marketing message to try to tell a narrative about using Trunki for staycations and camping, but also export became a real focus then, because this hand luggage ban was only between the UK and the US. So it kind of really got me pushing hard on exporting. So we were able to get over that particular challenge through that way. We had the big legal case. Another big problem we had was when I reshored production back to the UK, we started manufacturing in the UK, and that factory went bust on us. So we bought them out of administration and vertically integrated our supply chain. But there were quite a lot of lessons about kind of how to really engage the team down there. There were lots of things that went wrong, but I think in looking back, there were kind of three core principles that always seemed to work, and that was kind of embracing the challenge, because the sooner you overcome it, the sooner you can move forward. And it may end up being in a slightly different direction, but if you kind of try and escape from that challenge and don't tackle it, then it's just going to bring you down. And you've got to focus your energy wisely. You've got to be really laser focused on what you're trying to achieve, influencing the things you can influence, and just don't worry too much about the things you can't. So that lesson was very quickly learnt when in that hand luggage ban, trying to phone up the Department of Transport, Heathrow and the airlines, trying to find out when the ban was going to get lifted. I couldn't influence that at all. So I had to focus on what I could control, which was my costs and my marketing message, where to sell the product. And then adapting to change. Things are always changing. AI right now is going to completely change how we do business. So kind of embracing those changes rather than being scared of change.
Yeah, you've mentioned already that you sold Trunki. Our listeners are probably asking, you've got a successful business on your hands. Why decide to sell the company?
Well, in 2012, we raised some money with private equity, and then kind of tried to scale the business quite rapidly to expand into the US, to do a whole number of different projects, and to hire some senior people to help me lead the team. And we had a few challenges along the way, and then COVID hit, and our sales dropped by 70%. for 2 years. So we were turning over close to 10 million, and it dropped to 3 for 2 years. We had quite a bit of debt from this private equity deal, and kind of coming out of COVID and having to bounce back, kind of it felt like the right time to move on.
Yeah. So are there any lessons that you can share from that process for us?
The big fundraise, I think lesson number one was to run a competitive process. So we were using a corporate finance house who were pitching to a number of private equity firms, and that was enabled us to drive up the valuation. After running the business for 10 years, it was great to be a millionaire on paper, but having no cash in the bank was always a frustration. So I was able to take a bit of money off the table and sort of secure the family. So I'd always sort of advise doing that, just because although you always think the business is only ever going to go up to the right, sometimes it doesn't. So try and de-risk it a little bit. And we used that process of competition in the exit process as well, so running a couple of different businesses off each other to drive that valuation up. So yeah, get an advisor, normally in the corporate finance space, try and take some money off the table, and run a competitive process would be my main pieces of advice. But it also takes an awful lot of time, so you've got to make sure your team can still run the business without much of your input, because it's all consuming, pulling together and pitching to raise these funds.
One thing you haven't mentioned, which I wanted to ask you about, if you don't mind, is that you had a twin sister that you tragically lost as a teenager. You and your sister both suffer with cystic fibrosis, and I wondered whether that had any impact or any sort of influence on your resilience in business, because it seems to me that you've gone through many challenges on your business journey, and that really takes something to sort of get knocked down and come back up again. So I wondered if there was anything, about your background that you think has helped you on your journey.
Yeah, in hindsight, it absolutely has done. I mean, I spent much of my childhood in and out of hospital, clinging into oxygen masks, learning how to fight for breath, for breathing. And I managed to kind of win my battle, but my sister lost hers at 16. And it was kind of although it's hugely tragic, it turned out to be an incredible life lesson that when you're faced with kind of not knowing how long you're going to be around, you kind of lean in. You can choose to lean into life and make the most of it, or you can kind of withdraw from life and wallow in self-pity. So I chose to lean in and lived almost every day as it could be my last for my in my 20s. I had a great time. But when you're faced with challenges in business, nothing can kind of compare to losing your twin sister when you're a teenager. So it kind of put everything in perspective, really, and it was just another challenge to overcome.
You've talked about this. You've written down your story in a book, 65 Roses in a Trunki. What made you decide to put your story down in writing?
Well, there's a bit of reflection time, and then when COVID hit, was the right time to then really put that thinking down. I do quite a lot of business speaking, talking at events, giving keynote speeches, and I always get people asking me questions at the end, and they always say, "Oh, you should write a book." Yeah. But I never had talked about my CF side before, so thinking actually if I can share the lessons I learned growing up and how those impacted me in business, then maybe there's a bigger story there to tell. So the book's called 65 Roses and a Trunki. Young children struggle to pronounce cystic fibrosis, so they often call it 65 Roses. And the subheadings define the odds in life and business. And it's more of I really embrace the power of storytelling, so it's not like a checklist of things to do in business. I take you on a very emotional roller coaster story from childhood to running Trunki and pull out some of the key sort of learnings and lessons. But I also find talking at events, I often talk about the things that didn't go well, because I think that's where you really learn a lot. It's kind of character building. It's kind of really where you get most of your wisdom from, rather than talking about the successes.
And learning who you can rely on. I think, that those are lessons that have come out from other startup stories that we've had. When things go wrong, when your back's against the wall, who are the people, business-wise or, life-wise, that come and stand by your side and help you through that difficult part of your journey?
Yeah, yeah, always great to have a bit of support, but yeah, it's got to be your tenacity and your drive that's really going to get you through.
So we know now that you've exited Trunki. Can you tell us what you're doing these days, apart from your speaking?
Yeah, I saw a business opportunity a few years back with Amazon. So I run an Amazon marketing agency with my brother, helping brands succeed on Amazon. There's a very specific playbook for Amazon, and what I like about that is it's like an ecosystem that rewards success. So you can build what they call the Amazon flywheel effect. So if you're advertising on Facebook and Google, they don't care whether you make a sale, whereas advertising on Amazon, they do. So if you can build this flywheel effect, you can have a very successful brand on the platform. And you can also export globally on Amazon as well, across Europe and the US and places. So we help brands do that. And then kind of a couple of observations came to us over COVID. I was really interested in sleep health, and our kids had these grow clocks, and we like the clocks that tell kids when to get out of bed in the morning. And we found there was a gap in the market for helping parents get better sleep with these devices. So the kind of eureka moment for that came with the sleep research we were doing that was saying blue light bad to have at night, and the market leader has a blue light on at night and then turns to yellow in the morning to tell the kids to get up. So taking all the learnings from Trunki, we flipped the colours round, and it's now soothing amber colour at night, and then blue, which actually blocks melatonin production in the morning to help them get up. But making it cute, like because kids want to fall in love with products, parents want that utility, and also because it has a glass screen, it quite often drops and breaks, so we've put a silicone bump around it to keep it from breaking, and it's rechargeable. So that was our first product, and we're looking to expand that product range. The other kind of key insight was kids. Yeah, you read kids' stories, but actually podcasts are really popular now for kids to put on for the kids to fall asleep to. So we've created our own podcast series of really mindful, meditative sort of sleep stories to really calm children down before they go to sleep. And that's been a really great partner for the brand. So it's kind of looking further into the future. It's kind of marrying media with devices in interesting ways.
Sounds really interesting. I have to check that out later. We've covered loads of ground, and you've got a really fascinating and kind of complicated roller coaster story with lots of highs and lows. I wondered if you could share your top 3 tips for someone who's come up with a great product that they want to bring to market in terms of how they should go about starting their business.
Well, I think one of the key things is running a business isn't easy. It's not for everyone. So you've got to really, if you're going to go into this, you've got to expect to be knocked back a lot, to have a lot of challenges, and to really flip your mindset into being very proactive and very kind of positive about kind of taking these challenges on. So kind of really embracing those challenges. I think if it's an idea for a new product or service, then the most important advice I give startups or people with more like inventors is you've really got to test product market fit and do everything you can before you launch that product to find out whether the market actually wants your product at that price point. And quite often things will change. So you've got to, as a product designer, I'm used to not being too proud about any idea I have, and I'm very happy to evolve and iterate and prototype and take an idea from here through multiple changes to what actually you want to launch. But quite often I find people have one idea and they think that's it, and they don't want to change the idea. Yeah. So it's having that open mindset to adapt and change, and to listen to that feedback. And quite often people get a bit over cautious about IP. It depends who you're talking to, who your target customer is. But if it's consumers, they're not going to steal your idea. They haven't got a clue how to bring a product to market. If it's B2B, then you might need to be a little bit more careful. but try and get as much feedback as you can. And one story I kind of like to kind of use to explain this is when I first invented the suitcase, the Trunki, it didn't have a carry handle on the top because I've read some research that said young children shouldn't carry heavy bags. And that's kind of why it had the tow strap, so that they could tow the product along. They could also be towed. But then after we launched the product, the number one customer service inquiry was, put some bloody carry handles on it. I've got to carry it up the escalators, or I've got to grab it at the last minute. So we put some carry handles on. But you just never know until you get your product out there or start talking to people how that product's going to evolve and change. And if I had got a patent, going back to that initial patent chat, I could have patented a suitcase that didn't require carry handles on the top and then launched it and found out I needed them.
Yeah. Finally, before you go, Rob, can you tell our listeners where they can find you online and connect with you, please?
Sure, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for Rob Law. The brand that we've launched is called Zeepy, ZEEPY.co. And if you need any help with Amazon, then reach out to us on LinkedIn, or Affiliate Agency is our agency that help brands succeed on Amazon.
That's brilliant. We'll make sure we put links to all of those in the notes that accompany this episode. All that remains is to say thank you so much for your time today. It's been really lovely to chat to you and find out how your journey's got you to this point that you're at today. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Fiona. Great to have a chat.
Bye-bye. I don't think anyone would ever claim that starting a business is easy, but I have to say I'm genuinely in awe of Rob and all the hurdles he's had to overcome to develop, launch and protect Trunki. I hope you've enjoyed listening to his story today. It really is very inspiring. If you want to learn more, you can read his book, which is 65 Roses and a Trunki, Defying the Odds in Life and Business. And we'll share links to Rob and to his book, as well as links to related guidance from across the donuts in the summary notes that accompany the episode. You can also learn more about our sponsor, Lightyear, and you'll find the summary notes at www.startyourownbusinesspodcast.co.uk. Before you head off, if you're enjoying the show, please hit follow. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, follow's on the top right of the show page, and if you're listening on Spotify, it's just under our logo and title. Hitting follow makes sure you're notified about new episodes as soon as they drop, and it helps us reach more small businesses just like you. All that remains to be said is to thank Rob once again for sharing his incredible story with us. Until next time, all the best.